Guts, more than any other character in Berserk, embodies a core truth that resonates deeply with anyone who has ever felt trapped by their circumstances. Even in a world dominated by causality, where most things are beyond our control, one choice always remains: the choice to struggle. For most of us, life is a constant battle, one that we did not choose but have no say in whether we keep moving or not. We fight even when we are tired, beaten, or betrayed. And there is no reason to why we continue fighting except for the aching and sometimes painful feeling of survival. We must survive. In the world of Berserk, causality is this cosmic force that dictates the flow of everything. The God Hand, with their manipulation of events, serve as symbols of this deterministic universe where fate and suffering seem almost inevitable. But within this framework of oppression and despair, God stands as a symbol of resistance, showing us that while external forces might shape our lives, our will to fight back is what defines us. Let's take a look at God's life. He didn't choose to be born from a corpse. He didn't choose to be sold as a child soldier, to be abused, and to suffer endlessly. He didn't choose for the eclipse to tear apart the only people he ever cared about. And yet, after all this, after the worst betrayals, after endless suffering, Guts chooses to pick up his sword and fight. This is what makes Guts such an incredibly powerful character. While most heroes in fiction have some form of clear goal, whether it's revenge, justice, or saving the world, Guts fights not for any grand mission. He fights for the sake of fighting, because the struggle itself is an act of defiance. The act of fighting is his expression of life. And that's where the real impact of Guts' character lies. Now, in a world governed by forces like causality and the God Hand, Guts is constantly reminded that there are larger cosmic powers at work. His life seems insignificant in the grand scheme of things. It's easy to imagine that this knowledge would crush someone, to realize that so much of what happens is out of your control. And it's not just Guts who faces this. All of us in some form encounter these external forces: societal pressures, trauma, past experiences, or simply bad luck. And yet, what Guts shows us is that even when everything is taken from you, even when it seems like the universe is conspiring to break you, the one thing that can be taken is your will to struggle. This is where Guts parallels existentialist thought. Philosophers like Nietzsche and Sartre argued that life is in many ways absurd, hostile, indifferent to our suffering. But despite that, meaning is not something given to us. It's something we create through our actions, through our choices. Guts doesn't fight because he thinks he can defeat fate or causality. He fights because in that fight, he asserts his existence. He affirms that he's alive, even when everything around him says he shouldn't be. One of the most powerful moments in the series is right after the eclipse. Guts has lost everything: his comrades, and even the person he loves most. Casca is now left broken by the trauma of what happened. He could have given up right there. It would have made sense. No one would have blamed him. But instead, Guts keeps going. He keeps fighting, swinging his sword, not because he expects to win, but because fighting itself is his way of refusing to be crushed. This ties directly into what the Skull Knight tells him. Struggle, endure, contend, for that alone is the sword of one who defies death. The Skull Knight is a character who's also defied the forces of causality. He recognizes that the only true weapon against the cosmic forces that dictate life is the choice to struggle. It's not about defeating fate, but about continuing to fight in spite of it. Griffith stands as the direct foil to Guts, and his journey contrasts sharply with the raw struggle that defines Guts' existence. Where Guts embodies resistance against overwhelming odds, Griffith represents the pursuit of absolute control over fate, no matter the cost. From the very beginning, Griffith is defined by his ambition. His dream of attaining a kingdom drives everything he does. He is willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to achieve that goal. And for a while, it seems like his sheer willpower and intelligence are enough to defy all the limitations placed on him by the world. Griffith moves with grace and confidence, effortlessly shaping events to his advantage. He appears to have the control that Guts lacks, bending fate to his will as if destiny itself bows before his ambitions. But here's where the tragedy of Griffith comes in. His illusion of control is just that, an illusion. For all his power, charisma, and cunning, Griffith is still trapped within the flow of causality, just like everyone else. His ultimate failure, his capture, torture, and physical destruction is a reminder that even the most brilliant strategist can't escape the unpredictability of life. In a way, Griffith's descent into despair after losing everything highlights his inability to accept what Guts embraces, the power of struggle in the face of hopelessness. And this is where the paths of Guts and Griffith truly diverge. Faced with the ruin of his dream and his own broken body, Griffith could no longer bear the weight of failure. Unlike Guts, who chooses to fight against his circumstances even when everything is taken from him, Griffith chooses a different path. He surrenders completely to causality. When Griffith sacrifices the Band of the Hawk during the eclipse, he doesn't just sacrifice his comrades, he sacrifices his humanity. In that moment, Griffith chooses to embrace the hand fate has dealt him, but on his own terms. By becoming femto, a member of the God Hand, he gains the power he always craved, but it comes at the cost of everyone who ever trusted and followed him. Griffith's decision to sacrifice his comrades represents the ultimate act of control over his fate, but it also reveals his true nature, someone who values his dream above all else, even at the expense of human lives. But here's the key difference between Guts and Griffith. Griffith seeks to escape the limitations of being human, while Guts embraces them. Griffith refuses to accept weakness, failure, or suffering. To him, these are obstacles that must be overcome, not endured. When he's stripped of his control, he chooses to align himself with cosmic forces like the God Hand, becoming part of a system that manipulates fate rather than opposing it. He takes on a godlike role, elevating himself above humanity, but at the cost of his empathy and the bonds he once shared, making Zod's prophecy to Guts all the more meaningful. The predictability of Griffith's ambitions betrayed him. In contrast, Guts' strength lies in his willingness to endure suffering, to face it head-on and keep fighting. He doesn't try to escape his humanity. Instead, he fights to maintain it. While Griffith abandons his comrades for the sake of his dream, Guts fights for those he loves, even when it means enduring unimaginable pain. But Guts accepts that suffering is a part of life, and rather than trying to avoid it, he uses it as a fuel for his struggle. In that way, Guts represents the human spirit in its most primal form, raw, defiant, and unwilling to bend, even in the face of fate. What makes Griffith so tragic then is that while he achieves his dream, he does so by giving up his freedom. But Guts, who fights to assert his own will, even when fate tries to crush him, still maintains his freedom. Griffith chooses to align himself with fate to gain power. He sacrifices his humanity, his comrades, and his individuality for a chance to control his destiny. But in doing so, he becomes just another piece in the grand scheme of causality. His dream comes true, but it's no longer his dream. It's the product of a larger cosmic manipulation. And just like that, I'm given an answer to a question I've had my whole life. Why do I keep fighting? I keep fighting because I'm alive.